Gaius Marcius Coriolanus was a Roman general who is said to have lived in the 5th century BC. He received his toponymic cognomen, Coriolanus, because of his exceptional valor in a Roman siege of the Volscian city of Corioli. He was subsequently exiled from Rome, and led troops of Rome's enemy the Volsci to besiege Rome. In later ancient times, it was generally accepted by historians that Coriolanus was a real historical individual, and a consensus narrative story of his life appeared, retold by leading historians such as Livy, Plutarch, and Dionysius of Halicarnassus. More recent scholarship has cast doubt on the historicity of Coriolanus, portraying him as either a wholly legendary figure or at least disputing the accuracy of the conventional story of his life at the timing of the events. According to Plutarch, his ancestors included prominent patricians such as Censorinus and even an early king of Rome. The story is the basis for the tragedy of Coriolanus, written by William Shakespeare, and a number of other works, including Beethoven's Coriolan Overture, the consensus biography, The Siege of Corioli. Coriolanus came to fame as a young man serving in the army of the consul Postumus Cominius Auruncus in 493 BC during the siege of the Volscian town of Corioli. While the Romans were focused on the siege, another Volscian force arrived from Antium and attacked the Romans, and at the same time the soldiers of Corioli launched a sally. Marcius held watch at the time of the Volscian attack. He quickly gathered a small force of Roman soldiers to fight against the Volscians who had sallied forth from Corioli. Not only did he repel the enemy, but he also charged through the town gates and then began setting fire to some of the houses bordering the town wall. The citizens of Corioli cried out, and the whole Volscian force was dispirited and was defeated by the Romans. The town was captured, and Marcius gained the cognomen Coriolanus. Conflict and exile. In 491 BC, 2 years after Coriolanus's victory over the Volscians, Rome was recovering from a grain shortage. A significant quantity of grain was imported from Sicily, and the Senate debated the manner in which it should be distributed to the commoners. Coriolanus advocated that the provision of grain should be dependent upon the reversal of the pro-plebeian political reforms arising from the first Successio Plebis in 494 BC. The Senate thought Coriolanus's proposal was too harsh. The populace were incensed at Coriolanus's proposal, and the tribunes put him on trial. The senators argued for the acquittal of Coriolanus, or at the least a merciful sentence. Coriolanus refused to attend on the day of his trial, and he was convicted. Defection to the Volsci. Coriolanus fled to the Volsci in exile. He was received and treated kindly, and resided with the Volscian leader Attalus Aufidius. Plutarch's account of his defection tells that Coriolanus donned a disguise and entered the home of Aufidius as a supplicant. Coriolanus and Aufidius then persuaded the Volscians to break the truce with Rome and raise an army to invade. Livy recounts that Aufidius tricked the Roman Senate into expelling the Volsci from Rome during the celebration of the Great Games, thereby stirring up ill will among the Volsci. Coriolanus and Aufidius led the Volscian army against Roman towns, colonies and allies. Roman colonists were expelled from Circari. They then retook the formerly Volscian towns of Satricum, Longla, Polasca and Corioli. Then the Volscian army took Lavinium, then Corbio, Vitellia, Trebia, Lavici and Pedum. Further, the Volsci marched on Rome and besieged it. The Volscians initially camped at the Cluilian Trench, 5 miles outside Rome, and ravaged the countryside. Coriolanus directed the Volsci to target plebeian properties and to spare the patricians. The consuls, now Spurius Nautius Rutilus and Sextus Furius Medullinus Fusus, readied the defences of the city, but the plebeians implored them to sue for peace. The Senate was convened, and it was agreed to send supplicants to the enemy. Initially ambassadors were sent, but Coriolanus sent back a negative response. The ambassadors were sent to the Volsci a second time, but were refused entry to the enemy camp. Next, priests, in the regalia, were sent by the Romans, but achieved nothing more than had the ambassadors. Then Coriolanus's mother Veturia and his wife Volumnia and his 2 sons, together with the matrons of Rome, went out to the Volscian camp and implored Coriolanus to cease his attack on Rome. Coriolanus was overcome by the pleas, and moved the Volscian camp back from the city, ending the siege. Rome honored the service of these women by the erection of a temple dedicated to Fortuna. Coriolanus's fate after this point is unclear, but it seems he took no further part in the war. One version says that Coriolanus retired to Aufidius's home city of Antium. Coriolanus had committed acts of disloyalty to both Rome and the Volsci, and Aufidius raised support to have Coriolanus first put on trial by the Volscians, and then assassinated before the trial had ended. Plutarch's tale of Coriolanus's appeal to Aufidius is quite similar to a tale from the life of Themistocles, a leader of the Athenian democracy who was a contemporary of Coriolanus. During Themistocles' exile from Athens, he traveled to the home of Admetus, king of the Molosians, a man who was his personal enemy. Themistocles came to Admetus in disguise and appealed to him as a fugitive, just as Coriolanus appealed to Aufidius. Themistocles, however, never attempted military retaliation against Athens. Modern skepticism. Some modern scholars question parts of the story of Coriolanus. It is notable that accounts of Coriolanus's life are first found in works from the 3rd century BC, some 200 years after Coriolanus's life, and there are few authoritative historical records prior to the Gallic sack of Rome in 390 BC. Whether or not Coriolanus himself is a historical figure, the saga preserves a genuine popular memory of the dark, unhappy decades of the early 5th century BC when the Volscians overran Latium and threatened the very existence of Rome.